Why didn't you tell me she was mine? Logan's voice cracked as the words slipped out raw and trembling, heavier than he expected. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The pain behind his question carried enough weight to shake the air between them. Grace stood frozen across the room, arms wrapped protectively around their daughter, her eyes flashing with something between guilt and fury. The walls of Logan Whitaker's carefully controlled world had already started to crumble. Billion-dollar deals, polished suits, gleaming skyscrapers, none of it mattered anymore. Not when the little girl who called him daddy had eyes that matched his and stories he hadn't been there to hear. He had missed 6 years, first steps, first words, first dreams, and now he was being told to stay quiet, stay out of the way. But Logan had never been good at walking away from a fight, especially not one for his own daughter. What Grace revealed next would leave him speechless. And what came after that, it would put not just his legacy, but their lives on the line. Stay with us. You're about to uncover a secret that could destroy everything or heal what was never meant to be broken. Logan Whitaker stood alone in his penthouse suite atop Skyline Tower, a sleek monument to everything he'd built with his own ambition. Manhattan glittered beneath him, a kingdom he had conquered by 35. Billionaire, visionary, CEO of Whitaker Global Capital. The kind of man headlines called untouchable. He had just sent away his assistant and was about to dive into the Westbridge acquisition files when the soft chime of his smart home system interrupted the silence. Mr. Whitaker, the AI said calmly, "You have a visitor at the main entrance. A small one." Logan frowned. "A small visitor?" The surveillance screen blinked on. In the building lobby stood a little girl, no more than 6, with messy blonde pigtails and a pink backpack clutched tightly in both arms. She looked out of place, tiny and alone in the vast sterile marble space. "Is she with someone?" he asked. "No accompanying adult." Security confirmed she arrived alone. A strange chill crept over him, the kind that doesn't come from weather. There was something familiar, but he pushed it aside. "Have someone help her find her parents," he muttered, already turning back to his paperwork. 15 minutes later, his private elevator chimed. Logan barely looked up. "I said, have someone." "She insisted on seeing you personally," his head of security said over the speaker. "She says it's urgent. Her name is Sophie Taylor." Logan froze mid-motion. "I don't know any. She says it's about her mother." With a sigh of irritation and now curiosity, he allowed her up. The elevator opened and the little girl stepped out like she belonged in the clouds. She didn't flinch at the marble floors or the 20-foot windows or the silence of luxury. Instead, she looked straight at him with the clearest blue eyes he had ever seen. Eyes that were unmistakably his. "Hi," she said. "Are you Logan Whitaker?" "I am," he replied slowly. "What can I help you with?" She clutched her backpack tighter. "My mommy said I shouldn't come here, but I had to. She's been crying for days and we don't have money for rent or ice cream anymore." Logan blinked. "I'm sorry. Who's your mother?" "Grace Taylor. She used to work for you, in numbers." Her name hit him like a steel fist. Grace! From 6 years ago. The brilliant analyst who vanished during the Meridian merger. They had shared late nights, passionate whispers, and then she resigned out of nowhere. No goodbye, just silence. Logan's mouth went dry. "And why are you here about your mother?" Sophie looked up at him, voice trembling, but eyes burning with resolve. "Because Daddy, you fired her." The word hit him harder than he expected. Daddy. He stared at her. Really looked. Blonde hair like Grace's. But those eyes. His eyes. The kind you couldn't mistake. The kind that stared back at him in every magazine photo mirror and corporate portrait. His mind started doing the math. 6 years, 9 months. Sophie reached into her backpack and pulled out a photo. Grace in a hospital gown holding a newborn wrapped in pink. "My mommy said never to bother you," she added. "But I heard her tell Aunt Lauren we might have to move away forever." A daughter. He had a daughter. "How did you find me?" he asked, his voice rough. She shrugged with childlike logic. "Everyone knows where you live. Your picture's on a big sign outside." Logan's carefully curated world suddenly felt like it was teetering on glass. He tried to reach for his phone. "I need to call your mother." "No." Sophie shook her head fiercely. She doesn't know I'm here. I told her I was at my friend Madison's. I took the subway alone. You what? Logan's voice cracked. You're 6 years old, 6.5, she corrected with conviction. And I'm smart. Mommy says I'm too smart sometimes. He couldn't even argue. What happened with her job? He asked carefully. Some men came. They gave her papers from Whitaker Global. She came home and cried and said she got fired because of budget cuts. Sophie looked straight at him. Your cuts. Logan rubbed his temples trying to stay composed. The Westbridge deal. There had been department restructuring, but he hadn't personally reviewed every name. That was left to HR and Derek Coleman. Where's your mother now at home? She thinks I'm with Madison. He turned to grab his phone again. We need to call her. She's probably worried sick. No, she'll be mad. She told me never to come here. Her words landed hard. Why didn't she ever tell me about you? He asked before he could stop himself. Sophie looked down at her sneakers. She said, you were too busy with important things, that you didn't want to be bothered. Each word sank like a stone in his chest. Was that really how Grace saw him? As he dialed the number Sophie gave him, his hands shook. The phone rang, and when her voice answered, still so familiar it nearly knocked the wind out of him. Grace, he whispered, it's Logan Whitaker. There was a long silence. Then sharply, how did you get this number? Your daughter is standing in my living room. Another beat, then a sharp intake of breath. Oh my God. Is she okay? She's safe. She took the subway to get here, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let her out of your sight. The line went dead. Logan turned and found Sophie examining a photo on his shelf. Is that your mommy and daddy? Yes, he said slowly. Are they gone? They died when I was in college. Sophie's eyes widened. So? You don't have parents either. His throat tightened. No, I don't. Sophie wandered around the penthouse, exploring everything with innocent curiosity, completely unaware that her presence had already changed everything. When the elevator chimed again, Logan's heart pounded harder than it had in years. Grace stepped out, her blonde hair shorter now, sweater worn at the sleeves, but her green eyes unchanged. Full of fire, full of fear. Sophie, she called, and the girl ran into her arms. Don't be mad, Sophie pleaded. I just wanted to help. Grace clutched her daughter tight, then glared at Logan. What were you thinking? Bringing her here? I didn't bring her. She came on her own, Logan replied, his voice rising. I didn't even know she existed until 40 minutes ago. They locked eyes, 6 years of silence, heartbreak, betrayal, crashing into one unspoken moment. We should go, Grace said, standing up with Sophie. No, Logan said quietly but firmly. We need to talk. There's nothing to discuss. Yes, he said, lowering his voice. There is. You kept my child a secret for 6 years. She hesitated, something flickered in her expression, but she stood her ground. Go sit on the couch, sweetie, Grace said to Sophie. Mommy needs to talk to Mr. Whitaker. Sophie frowned. Are you gonna fight? No, Grace promised. Just grown-up talk. As Sophie settled with a tablet, Logan and Grace stepped into the corner of the room, their voices low but sharp with tension. You don't get to call her your child, Grace snapped. You've never been a father to her because you never gave me the chance, Logan hissed. Grace's voice broke for the first time. I was 27, pregnant, in love with a man who would never stop for anything, and I was going to tell you, but the day I came to your office, you were on the phone telling investors you couldn't afford distractions? I heard you say it, so I left. The words hit him like fists. He remembered that day, the biggest deal of his career, but not her standing outside his office. He looked over at Sophie, her tiny hands gripping his tablet, her legs swinging freely off the couch. And now he asked quietly. Now Grace's voice shook. Now she's yours. But don't think for 1 second this is going to be easy. And with that, she turned away, but not before he saw the pain in her eyes. Pain he had unknowingly caused. We're so sorry to pause the story here, but what would you do if you discovered you had a child you never knew existed? Should Grace forgive Logan or walk away? If you're feeling this story, hit that like button and share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear where in the world you're watching from. Grace didn't speak to Logan for the rest of that night, not when he offered to call them a car, Not when Sophie fell asleep on the penthouse couch with her arms wrapped around the stuffed koala she brought in her backpack. Not even when he whispered, almost pleading, "She's incredible." Instead, Grace simply gathered her daughter into her arms, nodded a cold thank you, and left. But Logan couldn't sleep. Sophie's voice still echoed in his head. "Daddy, you fired Mommy." Her eyes, so eerily like his own, haunted every corner of his apartment. And that tiny bracelet she left behind on the windowsill. It now rested in his palm, her shaky handwriting carved into the plastic beads. "I wish you loved us." By sunrise, Logan was in his office at Whitaker Global Capital. The city below was still waking up, but his world had already cracked open. "Pull all HR files on Grace Taylor," he told his assistant the moment she arrived. "Terminations, performance reviews, anything connected to the Westbridge acquisition?" She blinked. "All of them, sir, all of them," he said. His voice was cold now, focused. "And one more thing, dig into Derek Coleman's restructuring orders from the last quarter." Quietly. 2 hours later, Logan stared at a pile of documents that made his stomach twist. Grace's record had been spotless. Glowing performance reviews, millions saved for the company and market forecasting. Then abruptly termination for redundancy. But that wasn't all. Her last project had been an internal audit of the Westbridge deal. The very one his CFO, Derek Coleman, had been pushing hard. Too hard. And buried in the data was a name that sent a chill down his spine. Evan Carter, his old friend, his college roommate, the man who helped him build this empire from the ground up, and the man he had ruthlessly forced out when their visions clashed. It had taken years for Logan to even whisper Evan's name again. But there it was on a ghost entry buried in the company's founding papers. And beside it, in ink, Derek's signature on a confidential memo. The message was clear now. Derek had been hiding something, and Grace had gotten too close. His phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Meet me at Harborview Park. 1 p.m. Not your place. Not safe." He didn't need to ask who it was. It was exactly the kind of message Grace would send. No small talk, just strategy. At precisely 1 p.m., Logan spotted her sitting alone on a bench, staring at the playground, where Sophie climbed a jungle gym with fearless joy. "She has your stubbornness," Grace murmured, still not looking at him. "I know why you were fired," Logan said, taking the seat beside her. "It wasn't budget cuts. It was Derek." "You were auditing Westbridge, weren't you?" She turned to him, slowly, eyes cautious. "How much do you know enough to know there's $300 million in hidden debt buried in Westbridge's Asian subsidiaries, shell companies?" "Fraud." Grace's lips pressed into a line. "I kept copies. I always do." He looked at her, startled. "I wasn't planning to come forward," she continued. "But Derek, he made threats." Logan's blood ran cold. "What kind of threats?" "He knows about Sophie, that she's yours. He told me that if I made noise, people might start asking questions about why I left, about who her father is. About you." Logan's chest tightened. He used her as leverage. Grace nodded. "He said the world wouldn't take kindly to a scandal involving the golden boy of Wall Street and a child he ignored." "I'll ruin him," Logan said, standing. No, Grace grabbed his wrist. "You can't confront him yet. He's been with you from the beginning. People trust him. If you go to war now, it'll be your word against his and you'll lose everything." He sank back down beside her. "Then what do we do?" "We build our case," Grace said, quietly, strategically. Logan studied her face, the woman he'd once known so well now, harder, stronger, but still brilliant, still the same fire. "I want to be part of Sophie's life," he said, voice rough, "not just as a visitor, as her father." Grace looked down at the playground. "She's asked about you for years, you know. I used to tell her you were a good man who helped people with money." Logan's throat closed around the shame. "I want to know her," he said. "I want to earn it. But I also want to protect her from all of this." Grace nodded. "You can see her, but we do this my way, slowly, and Derek can never know she's yours. Not until we're ready." As Sophie jumped down and ran toward them, Logan felt something shift. He wasn't just protecting his company anymore. He was protecting something far more fragile. His daughter. 3 days later, Logan stood awkwardly in Grace's small apartment at Maplewood Court, Queens. He wore dark jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit. The place was cramped but filled with warmth, with books, crafts, mismatched pillows, with life. "Did you bring presents?" Sophie asked him the moment he stepped in. Sophie Grace said quickly, "That's not polite. It's okay." Logan smiled. "Yes, I did." He handed her a long box. Inside was a beginner's telescope. "For stargazing," he said. "If that's something you'd like to do." "With me?" "Maybe." Sophie's gasp was genuine. She flung her arms around him, catching him completely off guard. After dinner and a long round of questions about dinosaurs, Saturn, and rocks that glitter, Grace announced bedtime. "Can Daddy read me a story?" Sophie asked. Grace hesitated, then looked at Logan. "If he wants to." "I'd like that very much," he said, voice thick. He followed Sophie to her room and Grace stayed behind, hand gripping a coffee mug, heart caught somewhere between fear and something dangerously close to hope. When Logan emerged 15 minutes later, his face was transformed. "She's amazing," he whispered. "She asked if stars have birthdays." Grace almost smiled. "What did you say, that stars are born when cosmic dust comes together?" "So yes, they do. Very, very long birthdays." They sat in the kitchen, the smallness of the space bringing them closer than either expected. But Logan's phone buzzed. He read the message. His jaw clenched. "What is it?" Grace asked. "The board," he said. "Emergency meeting. Tomorrow. Some of the members are questioning my leadership." "Derek's making his move." Grace stiffened. "Then we need to be ready." "We will be," Logan promised. But the fire in his eyes said more than words ever could. "We hate to leave it here, but tell us, do you think Grace should trust Logan again after everything he's done? Or is he still the same man she ran from 6 years ago?" If this story has moved you, please like the video and drop a heart in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and where you're watching from. Logan had always believed that the most dangerous moments in life came with warning signs, market crashes, missed calls, whispers in hallways. But nothing about what was happening now felt predictable, and certainly nothing prepared him for what he saw on the surveillance feed that night at Whitaker Hill Estate. Thomas Harrington had breached the perimeter. It was no longer about company sabotage or boardroom betrayal. It was about survival. Becca's voice echoed beside him. "Logan, if Thomas is inside this house, he knows about the old safe room," Logan whispered, his blood cold. Sophie, still holding her hot chocolate, had no idea her childhood wonderland had just turned into a battlefield. But she noticed their faces and tilted her head, worried. "Are we still playing the quiet game?" "Yes, sweetheart," Becca said softly, kneeling beside her. "A very special one now." With trained calm, Logan led them to the hidden room behind his office bookshelf. The door sealed shut with a hiss. Inside, the safe room felt sterile and cold, but it was secure. Or at least it had been. Until Logan realized Thomas knew about this place because it had been built when Evan Carter, his old partner, was still alive. And Evan had told him everything. On the monitors, they watched as Logan's security detail exchanged fire with a team of intruders across the property. But one feed near the east wing showed something chilling. Thomas himself moving alone and heading straight for the study. "He's coming here," Becca whispered. "He knows." Logan reached for a cabinet, revealing a handgun. Becca's eyes widened. "You can't take him head on," she said. "That's what he wants. I'm not letting him near Sophie." She looked toward their daughter sitting calmly on the floor, drawing stars with a pink marker. Her innocence made the danger around them feel unbearable. Becca stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "You always fought to protect your empire. I'm asking you to protect your child." Those words, so simple, cut deeper than anything. Logan nodded. "We move." Now. Through a concealed passage, they reached the garage just as Thomas burst in through another entrance. He was armed, his eyes burning with years of fury. "Going somewhere, Logan?" he asked with icy calm. "Let them go," Logan said, stepping forward, shielding Becca and Sophie. "This is between you and me." Thomas's voice trembled with rage. "You took everything from Evan, his company, his future, his life. And now you think you get a family." Logan kept his voice steady. "You want justice, fine. But don't pretend you're doing this for Evan. You're doing it because you lost control." At that moment, Sophie peeked from behind her mother and stepped forward, holding out something in her small hand. Thomas blinked. It was a child's bracelet, plastic beads, fragile and colorful, with tiny letters that spelled, "I wish you loved us." "I made this," Sophie said. "You can have it. Maybe it will help." For a brief second, Thomas faltered. That second was enough. Logan lunged forward, knocking the gun from Thomas's hand. The two men crashed into the floor, fists flying, years of secrets and anger exploding in the confined space. Becca rushed Sophie into the bulletproof SUV and locked the doors. Inside the fight, Logan's movements were fueled by regret, by guilt, by the aching knowledge that he had indeed destroyed someone once. But not this time. He wasn't going to let it happen again. Finally, Thomas fell groaning on the cold concrete. Sirens wailed in the distance. The cavalry was coming. But it wasn't the police that mattered. It was what this moment meant. As Logan limped toward the SUV, Sophie jumped out and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You did good, Daddy," she whispered. He closed his eyes and held her like he never would let go again. 3 days later, the media exploded. Billionaire's hidden daughter revealed amid corporate conspiracy. Headlines blurred fact and fiction, but Logan didn't care. What mattered was that the truth was finally in the open, and they were still standing. Thomas had been arrested and denied bail. The board at Whitaker Global had seen the documents Grace prepared and voted unanimously to remove him. But public opinion wasn't as kind. Becca tossed a newspaper onto the table in Lauren's Brooklyn apartment. "Deadbeat dad or gold digger. America takes sides," the headline screamed. "They think I use Sophie as leverage," she murmured. "They don't know you," Logan replied gently. "But I do." Becca looked at him, her guard softening. "And what happens now?" He reached across the table. "Now I fix what I broke. I already submitted my resignation as CEO. Temporarily, until the media storm settles." Becca blinked. "You're stepping down for Sophie. And for you. I don't want our lives to be defined by headlines. I want to be there for school drop-offs and telescope nights. For her birthday. For the small things." Becca stared at him, this man she once believed would never change. But maybe people didn't need to be perfect to be forgiven. Maybe they just had to try. That night they returned to Whitaker Hill Estate, not as strangers or fugitives or enemies, but as something closer to a family. Sophie raced ahead, shouting that she wanted to show the stars their new telescope. And as Logan and Becca followed, something rare passed between them: peace. Not perfection, not fairy tale endings, but peace. On the terrace beneath a sky strewn with stars, Sophie pointed her telescope to the heavens. "Look," she said, "that one's mine. I named it Second Chances." Logan pulled Becca close. "Seems like a good name." She smiled. "Let's make sure we don't waste it. We hope this ending touched your heart as much as it touched ours." What moment in this story made your heart race the most? And what would you have done if you were in Becca's place? Tell us, how do you feel about this story? Comment number 1 if it didn't quite land for you. Number 2, if it felt just okay. And number 3, if it truly moved you. And we'd love to know, where are you watching from today? If this story meant something to you, please give it a like, drop a heart in the comments, and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances.